Alright guys, so today we're going to be talking about how to draw and use support and resistance lines. But first let me say, if you find value in what I'm bringing, please hit that like and subscribe button, and also follow us on Twitter. It's at WTrades on Twitter. So let's get into it. So uh, when you're drawing support and resistance lines, what you first need to know is you need to know the basics on what is a candle. A candle is whether you're on the 1 minute, 3 minute, 4 hour, it represents that time frame. If you're on the 3 minute, then one candle will represent 3 minutes of buying and selling. Excuse me. If it's a red candle, you'll have the whole wick here. It represents how far it traveled from the highest it went to the lowest it went. Now the top of the red candle is where it opened up at, where the price opened up on that minute or 3 minute. The bottom of the candle is where it closed at. Before it goes on to the next candle, it closes here. So then again, it opened here. Sometime within that open, it's went up to the top part of the wick, the candle right there, the highest price, all the way down to the lowest part of the wick, the lowest price, and then came back and closed here, right where it says close on the red candle. That is the whole candle, the wick and all. If we're looking at the green, it's the opposite. The body represents the open and close. It'll be the bottom on the green candle opens up here, and up by the top is where it's closed at. And the wick is how far it traveled from the highest price to the lowest price after opening and before closing. So, since we've got that out of the way, let's talk about support and resistance lines, what they basically are. So a support and resistance line is a line that is drawn across um, the bottom of the price range. You want to try to hit as many candles or wicks within that price range. The more you can hit, the better off it is. If you look at this picture here, you can see it goes across the majority of the bottom candles and wicks. Now in this one, they have a range in it. You can see on the blue is support. There's a range there, and on certain like Trading View, you can do ranges in that. You can do it on Weeble, but you got to draw a triangle. They're usually not ongoing, things like that. I usually just draw one line for each support. If I do draw something in between there, I'll show you that later. I'll make it a lighter line, just kind of like something to go by. But the resistance is just the opposite. It goes along the top of the price range of the candles. And the reason why they act as resistance is usually price will follow history. So if it's usually hit those spots and bounce back down, it's probably going to do it again until it finally breaks out. If it breaks out or breaks below that, those can be used for trading. You can decide whether it's going to go up or go down, things like that. We'll go into that later. Right now, we just want to set what resistance is and what support is. So if we go on to the next one here, if you can see here, if we start over here on the left, we have a support on the bottom and resistance on top. And the price bounces in between that, as you can see. And then eventually it might break out over top of resistance. Once it does that, you can see that now that resistance line has become support, and it's starting to form a new resistance line. So you have a new support and new resistance. If it was to break out to the bottom, then that support would become new resistance and you'd get a new support line. It'd just be the inverse of what you're seeing here. So if we go on to the next one, you can draw, you'll notice on my charts, I draw several different support and resistance lines, but they are usually called one or two things. It'll be key resistance and key support with other support and resistance lines in between that, or you'll see some people just draw a support and resistance with swing highs and swing lows is what they label them. So like in this case where it just says resistance line, the second line down, they would actually call it, where it's the other resistance line is, they'd call that a swing high. The opposite's true for the other. But I'll show you the way that I do this. I usually create many difference and they act as step ups or step downs. And I track them to see if it's doing what I want it to do. We'll go into that in more detail here in a minute, but just know there just doesn't have to be one support and one resistance. Usually there are many. You'll see a lot of times when they write about them and stuff, they'll call one support and one resistance. That's used to just keep it like track of the highest and the lowest within a certain boundary. So if we go on to the next one. Wait, before I go on to the next one, let me say that so far we've talked about horizontal support and resistance line. The next thing we can have is a trend line support and resistance. So you can see in this one, instead of it following a certain price, it's following a trend line up. So you can see every time it's bounced off of this trend line. And I bet you that when you start to draw these and start noticing these trend lines, you'll see that you'll draw them after. It's good to have about 3 points to hit off of. But when you start to draw them, you'll draw them out further, and you'll notice that they'll start bouncing either right at it or very near it. And it's good to watch those key points. So like if we have, in this next picture here, this is one where they have resistance and support drawn. And you can see that a trend line resistance support is just higher highs and higher lows. So it's bouncing off between these lines. And I'll show you some examples of this. But you can see how this can be used for either trading shares or calls and puts. So you know if it bounces off of this support, you can buy calls. If it bounces off the resistance and comes down, you can buy puts. And you can usually do this 2 or 3 times. Very rarely, unless you're trading in a blue chip stock, will it ever go above 4 or 5 bounces. But there are stocks that do it. So let's go to the next one I have here. So now we want to talk about breakouts. So in this one we have a breakout of the resistance line. So you can see that what it's done is it's come up through what was resistance and now is support. So we have a support, and you can see on this one that it drops below a little bit sometimes below that support. But overall, because of what we have further out, that is your support line. We also have a resistance line that goes out. So it's bouncing in between that, kind of consolidating out. And you can trade in between those two if you want to. But another way of using this is to see, okay, if you're in it or want to get in it. So let's say first you're in it. I want to follow, and you're around right where it says support and resistance zone on your price chart, and you're in it right there. And you say, okay, if it breaks out above, I'll stay in it. If it breaks out below, I'll cash out and take profit. So in this case, you can see it had a decisive breakout and went on. So you would stay in that stock. If it went below it, that might be a key to get out. So you can use this also. Most time I find out when you have a breakout, unless it's a big candle like it says here, decisive breakout, you'll see it come back down and test that what was resistance is now support line. So you'll see it test it by coming down at it, bouncing and going up. But sometimes you can see that it'll break out good from that, and as you can see up around the next couple of big red candles, it's starting to form a new support line up there. So it doesn't always have to come back to that resistance line and test it as support. One other one here before we start bringing up some real charts is what we was talking about, using it as bounce plays. Now this I call a support and resistance bounce play, because you can see, and I'll show you some examples of this. It's bouncing in and out, or at the support and resistance lines. So you can say you've had it bounce a few times, you can establish a resistance, establish a support. So now that we have that established, we can decide what do we want to do from here. Well, you can see the first buy one, we could say, well, that's a good point to buy. It's bounced there before, it probably bounced there again. Let's try it. So you can buy shares there or calls and ride it until it hits that resistance line. I usually find out it's good to just, if the resistance line is at 27, maybe take profits at 26.75, something like that. I'll even set a stop loss, take profit order, and it'll automatically sell. I don't even have to second guess it. The sell will go through as soon as it hits that. So you can see it's hit it now. So what do? Well, you wait for it to bounce, and then you can buy puts on the way back down. So after the puts hit the amount that you want, take profit, wait for it to bounce off that support, and buy back in again. You can see it'll do that several times. Now you're saying, yeah, right, this is a sheet of paper, right? Okay. Let's go here. First one I want to pull up for you is Lucid Motors. Let me go here. Let me pull it up on the big screen here. Okay, now that doesn't look like support and resistance line. What are you talking about, Doug? What is this? Well, this is simple. Let's go back out to the 4 hour. You can see that I have drawn some lines. And just like in the other one, it has come up from the bottom. It has hit this, the second resistance line up here. It has hit the top one once and almost twice, but usually the second one's the one I go by. We can see that it's hit it 3 times, and pretty much with the wicks, it's hit it 4 times. Each one of those is points that you could sell if you wanted to. So in this case, when after it's formed this support and resistance right here, so you can buy in here. When it comes up, I would have sold at the 27.28 mark, and then let it come on up to 29. When I seen it reversing, I'd have bought puts. Now, without it going all the way to the bottom, I don't know if I would have seen the reversal or not. So let's say I didn't see it and it comes back up. Well, if I miss that one, that's fine. When it hits the resistance again and bounces, I know that I can buy puts there and come back down. So when it bounces around the support again, I know that I can buy shares or calls. Now see right here, you had it come up and test this little resistance line. And it's a good thing we had it there, because we knew that that was a resistance line and we could prepare for it. So if you have calls, what you can do is you can go ahead and take profits there and wait for it to retest the support underneath it. Or if you have shares, you can just hold on to it, wait for it to retest and bounce. If it doesn't retest and it goes underneath support, well, you can say, well, maybe I ought to just get out of this now until see what it's going to do. Or you can decide to hold it, see if it comes back at this next one like it did right over here, and hold on. Whichever one you do, when you see it reversing, you can buy back in with calls or hold on what you have or buy shares and go up. When it hits that support again, you buy puts on the way down. Now, I trust in this so much that just yesterday, when I seen that it was bouncing here, I bought calls in this. And I will ride the calls to just right at um, the strike price, and I'll sell. That's enough for profit for me, because I'm out of the money with them, because I realize that it can go on up. That's fine enough for profit. I don't need to hold until they go to the moon. I've made my 30, 40%, 50%, maybe even 100% by at that point, and I'm out. That's plenty enough. Why be greedy? Learn to take profits. Now, another one I wanted to show you is a trendline support. This is Ford. Now, Ford is forming a new trend line. It looks like it's going to be one that goes out like Lucid did. But before that, we can see between the red lines here, it had a trend line support and resistance that it bounced between. And so you can ride them the same way we just talked about with Lucid. Buy shares or calls, buy puts, come down. Buy shares or calls, buy puts, come down. See right here, whenever it reached the top, we could either buy shares, buy puts, or you can hold out and wait. Now in this one, I probably, when I seen it come down, I probably would buy in. As a matter of fact, I think I did buy in on this one. When I seen that it was going back up, I started looking for reasons why and found out the earnings were coming up. So what I did is I changed direction. I got out. I waited to just the day before to see what people were doing. And right before it closed, the day before this, big spike, I bought in. I was part of this big spike. I think earnings was right after it. And earnings did good for it. And it went up, but you see that people sold off after earnings. They rode the highs and sold off. But you can see that earnings were good enough to keep people into the game. That's the reason why it's now forming a new trend or a new support and resistance line. So right now you can see that I have it between this mark here around 1441 or 44, 43. 1443 to about 1329. So right now that's where I have it, and that's good enough for calls for right now. And it's good enough to ride and see. I like to look for a little bit of a wider swing if I'm going to buy shares in it, but that's good enough for calls and puts if you want them. But that's one way that you can use trend lines for this. Okay, so last question. How do I draw trend lines? Well, let's pick a stock that I don't have any trend lines set in. Let's say, what is a good one here? Do I have any in Tesla? I do. You know what? Let's just erase these. Okay, so what I usually do is I'll draw out to the 4-hour mark first. And within that 4-hour mark, I'll set it in like this. I'll start out, I'll pick me a high. Right there. Don't worry if you don't get it perfect. We can tighten them up later. And a low. Now I see on this low that there's one right up above it. So I actually want to get in with that when that way it hits across. Now if you see right here, I've got this one over here that I'm going through. And then there's one red and one green one right here. So it's going through 3 of them. So that one will more than likely act as a better support. But we do have the bottom number in that. We have it in there so we know it. So what's the next one we want to try to hit? You know, we could hit here, and it could go across several of them. So let's throw that in there. And I'll show you right here in a second what I do if they're not really that good of support and resistance, but I still want to keep an eye on them. So our next one would be here, because we have this support here, and then we have all these going through here. So what is our next one? Let's start out with this one right in here and see what it would hit. Now look at that. It's almost perfect. If we come on up just a little bit, we've hit off a 1, 2, bunch of them through here, all these. And then all these right here, 1, 2, 3, and there's probably 2 or 3 actually in between all that. So that would be a really good support line. It's hitting across many of them right through there. So what's our next one? Let's see if we can get above this right in here. I don't necessarily like that as one, but I like to have one close to that top up there. So let's put one right there, and we'll adjust it better when we zoom in. And then we want to go across to all these right up here. So how it's hit right here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we got them going across. So we're not done. Like I said, I like to draw a bunch of them here just to make sure what we're hitting at. See, that would normally be a good one, but I don't like the way it runs kind of through that center. So I'm going to put one here at it, and we'll tighten it up whenever we get in. Or get rid of it if it don't work for us. So see, I posted that around these tops, and we'll see if it works when we zoom in. Again, right here, 1, 2, 3. We'll tighten it up if we need to, and then I'm going to throw one in because there was a little one right here. And we'll see if they work. So, right here's where I told you I would show you what I do if I don't, like we said down here, this one was a better support line than the bottom one. So the better support line I want to make red, thicker, and dotted. The weaker one I'm going to make yellow, leave it thin, and dotted. And when you start zooming in, it's almost invisible at times. So the top, we're going to do the same. We're going to make it red, thicker. So see, now we have these two darker ones going in. Now, as for right now, I'm going to make this one orange, thicker, dotted. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to do the same one here. Orange, thicker, dotted. Now, why didn't I do that one as a thick orange one? Why did I skip this one? Well, because it's only going across a couple right here and a couple right here. I'm not sure that that's a resistance or support line. In this case, it would be resistance. So, when I'm not sure, I make them yellow, small, and dotted. Well, look what I did, wrong one. That one. Yellow, leave it thin, dotted. As for these other ones, we'll go ahead and make this one too, orange. Thicker, dotted. As for these others, let's go into the 15-hour mark now. And these are where we said we're going to start tightening up on them. So that right there looks like it's okay. I like that one as a support line. So now, I'm going to make this one a thicker yellow one. And you see how my colors are changing as they go in? I'll explain that here in a second. This one looks like a good top one. So I'm going to make this one a thicker red one for right now, and I'll explain that here in a second one. Because remember, our red's only supposed to be our max support. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and change this one to red too. Now, here's the ones that we really need to tighten up and see how they work. Then when we bring that one to there, if you look, it actually hits better across these ones right here, that one, and so forth. And almost better as long as this one that dips in right there. Now, we can add one or take this up to here and look. If we take it up to there, it hits across those two, right? So which one would be a better support and resistance? Who knows? Only time can tell you with it. So what should we do in this case? Well, what I like to do is say, fuck it, throw in some more support lines. Right? Can never have enough. And we'll make them thin because we don't know what they're going to do yet. We don't know which one's going to be the better support line. So I made them thinner, and we'll see which one gets tested better in the future. If one turns out to be a better one than the other, we will erase one of them. If it turns out that they like to bounce in between them or near them, we'll leave it there as a box support line like we showed in the beginning. Now, what about this one? Right here where the price is at. Well, let's go into the 3-minute and look. Okay, if we go into the 3-minute, those are kind of shitty for support and resistance lines. Not too bad. They hit over here okay. But right in here they don't. They don't really tell the whole story. How far can we come up over here? So what I'm going to do, because they hit so well over there, I'm going to leave this one another yellow and thin line. This is actually a bad one to show you all this on now that I've gotten into the meat of it. Okay, now right up here, I want to change these. I want to bring these down to those lines. And I want to add one in across all these. Okay, so here's what we got. That one, I want to leave it orange, thicker. I like that one pretty good as a support. Or resistance, I mean. This one, I'm not so sure about it neither, so we're going to leave it thinner. So this is what I have right now if I was going to play this. Oh, crap. Okay. And you know, if you go in smaller time scales, you can add more if you want. Just remember, whenever you back out now, it's going to look pretty wild like this. So let's take a look at this. As we come out right here, let's start right here. Look, Tesla has found this little bounce pattern in between these that is trending upwards, as we can see. Right? If you noticed earlier, before I raced them, I had a little trend line going between some of them. But it trended upwards, but stayed in between these support lines we drew. Same thing right here. It consolidated out, but it bounced in between these. And these bounces are pretty big. That's 626 to 693. That's almost a $75 bounce, or right at $75 bounce. So these ain't little ones for Tesla. I mean, you got one candle here that bounced from 648 to 677. And this is on the 4-hour time frame. That's a pretty good bounce. So you can see how it does here. Just like in that first picture we showed, it come down here, it bounced off, it's tested a new resistance, turned support line, bounce, broke through resistance, hit this resistance, got rejected, test, bounce, up, stayed up here, bounced in between this for a little bit, come back down. So we knew that it was going to bounce in between these. And it did for 1, 2, 3, 4 on up. Now, we can assume that for Tesla, it'll do one of two things. If it keeps going up, it's going to bounce up here now. So what we could look at is around this 675 line, because that's usually the range that it has around there for the type of candles. It'll bounce somewhere in between there. If we know that if it comes on down, that it's probably not going to keep that upper support and resistance line. it'll probably come back down and test this one. Then it may even continue on down, just like it has before in the past. See, Tesla's been all over the map. Usually Tesla's downside goes quickly. When Tesla goes down and dips, it dips hard and fast. When it climbs, it'll shoot up quick to a certain point and then consolidate a little bit, and then shoot up a little bit and then consolidate a little bit. That's another thing too, guys. Pick you a couple of stocks that you like and watch them. Watch how they do. You can see here with Bitcoin Cash. I've been watching it for a while. I know this stock like the back of my hand. I can about tell you what it's going to do once I start seeing candles. Now, am I always right? No, nobody can predict the future. But I can predict it with a good amount of certainty. But I'm not always going to be right with it. It's just like your child. You know your child. You know what he or she's going to do. But haven't they also done something that you're like, my child would never do that. And then it turned out they actually did. Right. Stocks is like that. No, my stock ain't going to do that. What the hell? It's dropped 300 points. But guys, this is what I wanted to show you with support and resistance line. Hope this helps out. If you have any questions, put them down below. I'll try to answer them. Or you can jump into our live streams every trading day and on Sundays for the watch list. So I hope this helps you out. Again, if you find value in what I'm doing, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell icon. Share it with your friends. Jump on Twitter, @WTrades on Twitter. Check us out. I post when I'm going live. I post charts, news, things like that. Keep up with it. Alright guys, you have a good day. I'm out.